Dog won't stop barking at military aircraft. Police arrive and their discovery shocks everyone. The early morning silence at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport shattered as Max's sharp bark cut through the air. Sarah Collins jerked her head up, startled by her partner's sudden intensity. In their 3 years together, she had never heard the Belgian Malinois make that sound, a desperate, urgent cry that sent chills down her spine. The dawn light painted the Atlanta skyline in shades of purple and gold, but there was nothing beautiful about this moment. "Max, heel!" Sarah commanded, but the usually obedient K9 remained fixated on the military C-130 taxiing across the tarmac. His muscles were taut beneath his tactical vest, ears forward, and amber eyes locked on the aircraft with an unnerving focus. The morning dew had settled on his dark fur, giving him an almost ethereal appearance in the early light. Sarah felt the weight of her badge against her chest as she watched her partner's unusual behavior. Every morning for the past 5 years, they'd patrolled these grounds together, their routine as consistent as the planes taking off overhead. But lately, something had changed. It started 3 weeks ago, subtle at first, just a slight tension in Max's posture whenever certain military aircraft passed overhead. Now, it had escalated to this. The radio on Sarah's shoulder crackled. "Unit K97, status check on that disturbance. Copy that, Control. Just a momentary alert from my partner. Situation under..." Sarah's voice trailed off as Max's barking intensified. He pulled against his lead, something he had never done in all their time together. This wasn't aggression. She knew every nuance of his behavior. This was different. This was desperation. The C-130's engines roared louder as it approached their position. Sarah noticed something odd about the way Max tracked the aircraft. His head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring, as if he were trying to catch a scent that shouldn't be there. She'd seen that look before, during their biggest drug bust last year, when he detected narcotics in a shipment that had fooled 3 other K9 teams. "Officer Collins!" The sharp voice of Lieutenant Davidson cut through her observations. "Get your dog under control, now!" Davidson stood at the terminal entrance, his starched uniform a stark contrast to Sarah's windbreaker and tactical pants. Sarah felt her cheeks flush as other officers turned to watch. Davidson had been riding her hard lately about Max's irregular behavior. 3 times in the past week, Max had reacted strongly to military flights, each time with increasing intensity. But this was the first time he had completely ignored her commands. "Max, come!" She tugged gently on his lead, but he planted his feet firmly on the ground. His barking had changed to a low, persistent whine, a sound she had only heard once before, when they had discovered a massive drug shipment hidden in a cargo container. That case had earned them both commendations. The C-130 lifted off, disappearing into the dawn sky. Only then did Max's posture relax, though his eyes remained fixed on the vanishing aircraft. Sarah knelt beside him, running her hand through his dark fur. His heart was racing beneath her palm, and she could feel the tremors running through his muscular frame. "Collins, my office, now." Davidson's tone left no room for argument. "And bring his training logs." As they walked across the terminal, Sarah's mind raced. Max's behavior had been impeccable since she had rescued him from the shelter 2 years ago, after his previous handler had deemed him too difficult to control. She remembered that day clearly, walking past the kennels, stopping at his cage. While other dogs barked and jumped, Max had sat quietly, watching her with those intelligent eyes. She had seen past the labels, recognizing something special in his steady gaze. Davidson's office felt smaller than usual, the morning sun casting long shadows across his desk. "Sit," he ordered, not looking up from Max's file. Sarah remained standing. Max pressed against her leg, a familiar gesture of solidarity. "This is the 4th incident this month," Davidson said, finally meeting her gaze. "Your dog is becoming unstable, Collins. You know what that means." He tapped his pen against the file, a nervous habit she'd noticed whenever he had to deliver bad news. Sarah's throat tightened. She knew exactly what it meant. Dogs that showed signs of instability were removed from service. Some were retired, others... She couldn't finish the thought. Her hand found Max's head, fingers curling in his fur. "Sir, Max isn't unstable. Something's wrong with those flights. His behavior is too specific, too targeted. Give me time to..." "Time's up, Collins." Davidson closed the file with a sharp snap. "I'm scheduling Max for a psychological evaluation. Until then, you're both on administrative duty, desk work only." He leaned back in his chair. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Sarah felt Max tense beside her. Somehow, he always knew when she was upset. "Sir, please. Max has never been wrong about a target. Never. If he's alerting on these aircraft..." "That's enough!" Davidson stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "Military flights are outside our jurisdiction. End of discussion. Dismissed." Walking back to their patrol car, Sarah's mind was already racing with possibilities. Max had earned her trust 100 times over. If he was trying to tell her something about those flights, she owed it to him to find out what. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through her recent photos. There it was, the tail number of today's C-130. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Max was just getting older, more anxious. But as she looked down at her partner, saw the unwavering focus in his eyes, she knew better. In 5 years of service, Max had never given a false alert. Not once. This wasn't the end of their investigation. It was just the beginning. Max's tail wagged once, as if confirming her thoughts. Sarah smiled, scratching behind his ears where his fur was softest. "What do you say, partner? Ready to break a few rules?" His soft whine was all the answer she needed. Whatever was happening with those military flights, they would figure it out together, even if it cost them everything. The fluorescent lights of the K9 unit's office buzzed overhead as Sarah stared at her computer screen, the image of the C-130's tail number burning into her vision. 3 days of desk duty had felt like an eternity, but it hadn't been wasted time. Every military flight that had triggered Max's response shared a pattern. They all arrived between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., always on Tuesdays and Fridays, and always from different origins. Max lay at her feet, his chin resting on her boot. Every few minutes, his ears would prick up at the sound of distant aircraft, but he remained calm. It was only those specific flights that set him off. Sarah reached down to scratch behind his ears, her mind racing through possibilities. In 5 years of service, Max had never been wrong about a target. Not once. Collins. The gruff voice of Jack Martinez, a veteran K9 handler, broke through her thoughts. "Got a minute?" Sarah minimized her browser window, but Martinez had already glimpsed the military flight logs. He closed the office door behind him, his expression grim. "Word of advice? Let this one go. So, Jack, you've known Max since he was certified. Have you ever seen him give a false alert?" Martinez's weathered face softened. He'd been there when Sarah first brought Max in from the shelter, had helped train them both. "No," he admitted, "but I've seen good dogs and good officers lose everything chasing shadows." He paused, glancing around before lowering his voice. 3 months ago, Thompson's dog started acting strange around certain cargo flights. Thompson pushed it, started asking questions. Next thing we know, both of them are transferred to traffic duty in Savannah. Sarah's pulse quickened. "Which cargo flights?" "Don't." Martinez's tone was sharp. "I'm telling you this as a friend. Some doors once opened can't be closed." The conversation was interrupted by Max's sudden alertness. His head snapped up, muscles tensing. Through the office window, Sarah caught sight of a familiar figure crossing the parking lot, Agent Thomas Weber from the DEA. She'd worked with him on several cases, but something about his presence today felt off. "Martinez," she said carefully, "didn't you tell me Weber was on assignment in Miami this month?" The older officer's expression confirmed her suspicions. Max's low growl vibrated through her boot. "I need to check something in the evidence room," Sarah announced, perhaps too loudly. "Max, come." The K9 evidence room was their sanctuary, the one place where Max's occasional barking wouldn't draw attention. Sarah had spent countless hours here, training him to detect new substances. Now she pulled out her phone, hands shaking slightly as she pulled up the flight logs she'd photographed. "Show me what you know, partner," she whispered, spreading printouts of various aircraft on the floor. Max's reaction was immediate. He moved purposefully to the C-130 photos, then to specific cargo manifests. His behavior wasn't aggressive. It was precise, deliberate. Sarah's heart pounded as she connected the dots. The flight patterns, Weber's unexpected appearance, Thompson's transfer. "This goes higher than we thought, doesn't it, boy?" A sharp knock on the door made them both jump. "Officer Collins?" Weber's voice carried through the metal door. "Got a minute?" Max's hackles rose, but he remained silent, a warning only Sarah could read. She quickly gathered the printouts, shoving them into her bag. "Just finishing up some training, sir." The door opened before she could reach it. Weber stood there, his usual friendly smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Heard you've been asking questions about those military flights." Standard procedure," Sarah replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. "After Max's reaction, we have to document everything." "Of course." Weber stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. The space suddenly felt much smaller. "You know, I always admired your dedication, Collins, but sometimes dedication can be misplaced." Max moved slightly, positioning himself between Sarah and Weber. The agent's eyes flickered to the dog, then back to Sarah. "I have a proposition for you. There's an opening in our K9 training division in Quantico. Fresh start, better pay, away from all this confusion." The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Sarah felt a cold clarity settle over her. "Thank you, sir, but Max and I still have work to do here." "Do you?" Weber's smile vanished. "Because from what I hear, your dog's about to be declared unstable. That's a career ender, Collins, for both of you." Max's growl was barely audible, but Sarah felt it through the floor. She thought of Thompson in Savannah, of Martinez's warning, of all the patterns they'd uncovered. "We'll take our chances. Have it your way." Weber opened the door. "But remember, I tried to help." After he left, Sarah sank to the floor beside Max, her hands trembling as she stroked his fur. "What did we stumble into, boy?" Max's wet nose pressed against her cheek, his way of saying they were in this together. Sarah pulled out her phone, typing a quick message to an old friend at the airport's traffic control tower. "Need eyes on tomorrow's 3 a.m. arrivals." Like old times, the response came almost immediately. "Coffee's on me. Bring donuts." Sarah looked at Max, saw the unwavering trust in his amber eyes. They had just declared war on something much bigger than themselves. But as her partner's tail wagged steadily, she knew they had no choice. Max had never been wrong about a target, and she wasn't about to start doubting him now. The evidence room's lights flickered overhead, casting shifting shadows on the walls. Tomorrow night, they would get answers, or they would paint targets on their backs trying. The air traffic control tower loomed against the star-studded Atlanta sky like a sentinel. Sarah killed the engine of her unmarked car, checking her watch. 2:47 a.m. Max sat alert in the back seat, his breathing steady despite the tension that had been building all day. The box of donuts on the passenger seat was just for show. Their real purpose here could get them both fired, or worse. "Remember the first time we came here, boy?" Sarah whispered, reaching back to touch Max's fur. 2 years ago, they'd made their first major bust in this very parking lot, but her mind drifted further back to the day that started it all. The shelter had been her last resort. After losing her previous K9 partner Rex to cancer, Sarah had sworn she wouldn't go through that pain again. But 6 months of working regular patrol had felt like missing a limb. That's when she'd heard about the problem dog other departments had rejected. The memory was crystal clear. Max, sitting in his kennel, completely still, while other dogs barked and jumped. The shelter worker's words still echoed in her mind. Former military training program. Too intense, too focused. He's burned through 3 handlers already. But Sarah had seen something different in those amber eyes. Not aggression, precision, not stubbornness, determination. The same qualities that had made him too difficult for others made him perfect for her. A tap on the passenger window snapped her back to the present. Mike Chen, her friend from air traffic control, slipped into the seat, bringing with him the smell of coffee and midnight shifts. "You're either crazy or onto something big," he said, accepting a donut. "Probably both. Tell me about the C-130s, Mike." He glanced at Max in the rearview mirror. "Your boy's gotten you into quite a situation. These flights, they don't exist, at least not officially. No flight plan, no cargo manifest, nothing in the system. But they land and take off like they own the place." Sarah's pulse quickened. "How long has this been happening?" "Started about 4 months ago. Always the same pattern. Always with top-level clearance that bypasses normal protocols." He paused, wiping donut sugar from his fingers. "But here's the weird part. The crew never leaves the aircraft. Ground crew is always the same team, always wearing military uniforms. But what? Their patches are wrong. Little details that any military brat like me would notice. And Sarah," his voice dropped, "they're due in 15 minutes. Max's sudden alertness confirmed it before the distant engine sound reached their ears. Sarah grabbed her night vision binoculars. "I need to see this up close." "Sarah, don't!" But she was already moving, Max at her heel. They stuck to the shadows, years of training making their movements silent and synchronized. The C-130 appeared as a dark shape against the stars, its landing lights cutting through the night. They reached the perimeter fence just as the aircraft touched down. Through the binoculars, Sarah watched the ground crew emerge from a hangar. Mike was right. Their uniforms were military, but something was off. The patches, the way they moved. These weren't soldiers. Max's muscles tensed beneath her hand. He'd caught a scent, but she held him steady. "Not yet, boy. We need proof." The cargo bay opened with a hydraulic hiss. In the green glow of her night vision, Sarah saw them unloading large crates, military standard, but the handling was all wrong. No documentation, no proper procedures, just quick, furtive movements in the dark. She raised her phone to record, but a sudden movement caught her eye. A figure had detached itself from the shadows of the hangar. Even from this distance, she recognized Weber's walk. "Time to go," she whispered to Max. But as they turned to retreat, a beam of light cut through the darkness. "Stop right there," Sarah's training took over. "Max, run dark," the command they'd practiced countless times but never needed, until now. Max disappeared into the shadows as Sarah sprinted in the opposite direction, drawing their pursuers away from her partner. Footsteps pounded behind her. The fence was too far, the car exposed. Her only option was the maintenance shed. She dove inside, pressing herself against the wall, controlling her breathing like she'd learned in K-9 training. Minutes passed like hours. Voices approached, then faded. When silence finally returned, Sarah felt a familiar wet nose press against her hand. Max had found her, as she knew he would. "Good boy," she breathed, hugging him close. Her phone was still recording in her pocket, evidence of whatever operation they'd stumbled upon. But as Max's body tensed again, she realized the night wasn't over. "Well," Weber's voice cut through the darkness. "Isn't this interesting?" Sarah straightened, keeping one hand on Max's collar. In the dim light, she saw Weber's outline in the doorway. He wasn't alone. "You know," he said almost conversationally, "most people would have taken the transfer offer." His gun glinted in the darkness. "Most people are smarter than this." Max's growl rumbled through the small space. Sarah felt strangely calm. Most people don't have a partner they trust with their life. Sweet sentiment. Weber raised his weapon. "But this is the real world, Collins. And in the real world," his words cut off as emergency lights suddenly flooded the airfield, accompanied by the distinctive whoop of police sirens. Through the door, Sarah glimpsed multiple vehicles converging on the C-130. Mike. He must have called it in. Weber's moment of distraction was all she needed. "Max, take." What happened next would later be described in official reports as a coordinated K-9 response to an armed threat. What the reports wouldn't capture was the perfect synchronization of handler and dog, the result of thousands of hours of training and absolute trust. As Weber hit the ground, his gun skittering away, Sarah heard Martinez's voice outside. "APD! Everybody down!" She kept her knee on Weber's back as Max held him in place, both of them rock steady as chaos erupted. Across the airfield, in her pocket, her phone was still recording, documenting every word as Weber began to curse. Sarah looked at Max, his ears alert and tail straight. Every inch the problem dog nobody else had wanted. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good boy." The interrogation room's harsh lights did nothing to soften Lieutenant Davidson's thunderous expression. Sarah sat across from him, still in her dusty uniform from the airfield incident, while Max lay at her feet. The adrenaline from their confrontation with Weber had faded, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and questions that grew darker by the hour. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Davidson's voice was dangerously quiet. "The FBI, DEA, and Homeland Security are all over this building. Weber's claiming diplomatic immunity, and half the evidence from the airfield has already been classified above my pay grade." Sarah pushed her phone across the table. "Everything's recorded here. The irregular flight patterns, the fake military personnel, Weber's threats. Evidence obtained illegally by a suspended officer and her K-9 partner, who was already under psychological review." Davidson rubbed his temples. "They'll bury this, Collins. They'll bury you." A sharp knock interrupted them. Agent Catherine Reynolds from Internal Affairs entered, her tailored suit a stark contrast to Sarah's disheveled appearance. "Officer Collins, a word in private." "Max stays with me," Sarah said firmly. Reynolds studied the Belgian Malinois with unexpected interest. "Actually, I'd prefer that. Follow me." They walked through the bustling precinct, past clusters of federal agents and bewildered local officers. Reynolds led them to a small conference room dominated by surveillance photos, all featuring the mysterious C-130. "6 months ago," Reynolds began, "we started tracking an unusual pattern of military flights across multiple jurisdictions. Atlanta, Miami, Dallas, always with perfect paperwork, always untouchable. 3 K-9 units flagged these flights. All 3 handlers were transferred or resigned. Then we heard about Max. Sarah's hand found Max's fur. You knew about this. We suspected, but we needed proof of the cargo, proof of Weber's involvement. Your partner gave us both." Reynolds smiled slightly. "Apparently, a Belgian Malinois' nose can't be fooled by diplomatic credential. The other K-9s, Thompson's Dutch Shepherd in Savannah, Rodriguez's Malinois in Dallas, they detected something too, but their handlers backed off when pressured." Reynolds spread more photos across the table. "We believe they're using decommissioned military aircraft to move drugs across state lines. The diplomatic credentials are forged, but the political protection is very real." Max's sudden growl made them both turn. Through the conference room window, Sarah spotted Weber being escorted through the precinct by 2 men in dark suits. Despite his handcuffs, he was smiling. "He knows he's untouchable," Reynolds said quietly. "The evidence will disappear, witnesses will go silent, and everyone will move on. Unless what? Unless we can prove the operation is still active." "One solid bust caught in the act." Reynolds met Sarah's eyes. "We've identified their next likely shipment, tonight. But we need a K-9 unit that can't be bought or scared off." Sarah felt the weight of the decision. "They'll know Max's alert pattern now. They'll be watching for us." "Yes," Reynolds didn't sugarcoat it. "This is a one-shot deal. If we miss, they'll shut down the route and disappear. If we hit it..." She paused as Weber glanced toward their window, his smile widening. "Well, let's just say certain people in Washington would be very interested in why fake military flights are entering U.S. airspace." Max's ears pricked up at a familiar sound. Martinez's voice in the hallway, arguing with someone. Through the door's window, Sarah saw him confronting one of Weber's suited escorts. "Time's running out," Reynolds pressed. "Are you in?" Sarah looked down at Max, remembering the shelter worker's words. Too intense, too focused. Yet the same qualities that had made him a problem dog had also made him impossible to corrupt or intimidate. In a world of shifting loyalties, his remained absolute. "If we do this," Sarah said, "we do it our way. No political games, no compromises. Max works the scene like any other operation, and we follow wherever his nose leads, even if it leads somewhere people don't want us to go. Reynolds nodded slowly. I can work with that. But Collins? Her expression hardened. Watch your back. Weber has friends in high places, and they play for keeps. As if on cue, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Martinez burst into the conference room, his face flushed. They're releasing Weber. Some kind of diplomatic order just came through. Sarah watched through the window as Weber straightened his jacket, now free of handcuffs. He turned, meeting her gaze with a cold smile, and mouthed 2 words. Good dog. Max's growl deepened, but Sarah kept him steady. What time tonight? She asked Reynolds. Midnight, North Runway. Reynolds gathered her photos quickly. Weber will be watching. His reputation's damaged. He'll need to shut this down fast. Sarah felt a familiar calm settle over her, the same feeling she got before a major operation. Then we better give him something worth watching. Martinez looked between them. You're not seriously... Jack, Sarah interrupted. Remember what you said about doors that can't be closed? She scratched Max's ears, drawing strength from his solid presence. Well, we're not just going to open this one. We're going to kick it down. As they left the conference room, Sarah glanced at her watch. 8 hours to midnight, 8 hours to prepare for an operation that could end their careers, or worse. But as Max padded silently beside her, alert and ready, she knew they had no choice. Some doors, once opened, couldn't be closed. But sometimes, that was exactly the point. Midnight painted the North Runway in shadows, broken only by the dim glow of runway lights stretching into darkness. Sarah crouched behind a maintenance vehicle, her heart steady despite the stakes. Max pressed against her leg, his breathing calm and focused. They'd been in position for an hour, waiting, watching, while Reynolds' surveillance team maintained radio silence. Movement at the perimeter! Martinez's voice crackled through her earpiece. He'd insisted on backing them up, positioning himself in the control tower with Mike Chen. 2 vehicles approaching, military transport trucks. Sarah felt Max tense before she heard the engines. The trucks appeared like ghosts in the darkness, their headlights off, moving with practiced precision. Behind them, right on schedule, came the distinctive sound of a C-130's engines. All units hold, Reynolds commanded over the radio. Wait for confirmation. The aircraft touched down silently, its running lights dimmed. Sarah watched through her night vision binoculars as the same crew from before emerged from the shadows. Their movements were different tonight, faster, more nervous. They knew they were exposed. Collins, Reynolds whispered through the radio. We need probable cause before we move. If they're using different containers, different masking agents. Max knows, Sarah responded softly. Don't you, boy? His ears were already forward, his nose working the air. Sarah unclipped his lead. Max, search. He moved like a shadow, keeping to the darkness as Sarah covered his advance. The ground crew was unloading crates, similar to the previous night, but not identical. Sarah's pulse quickened. They'd changed their methods, just as Reynolds had feared. Max reached the first truck, circling it once before moving to the second. His body language shifted subtly. Something was different. Sarah raised her hand, ready to signal Reynolds' team. A flash of movement caught her eye. Weber. He stepped out of the second truck's cab, and he wasn't alone. Sarah recognized the man with him from the precinct, one of the suits who'd secured his release. Max froze, then dropped into a stalking posture. Sarah recognized that position. He'd found something big. Now, Collins, Reynolds ordered. Take it now. Max, alert. His bark shattered the midnight silence. Instantly, the airfield exploded into chaos. Emergency lights flooded the runway as police vehicles roared out of hiding. The ground crew scattered, but Weber and his companion didn't run. They turned directly toward Max. Sarah saw the glint of metal too late. Max, evade! The shot cracked across the tarmac. Sarah's heart stopped, but Max was already moving, a dark blur cutting through shadows. Weber's companion fired again, the bullet sparking off concrete as Sarah sprinted toward them. Police! Drop your weapons! Weber laughed, the sound carrying over the chaos. "You should have taken the transfer, Collins." He raised his own weapon, not at Sarah, but at Max. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Max launched himself at Weber's companion just as Sarah tackled Weber. They hit the ground hard, his gun skittering away. Sarah heard Max's target cry out, then a sharp yelp that turned her blood cold. "Max!" She drove her elbow into Weber's solar plexus, rolling clear as Martinez and the tactical team swarmed in. Her eyes searched the darkness frantically. "Max, come!" For 3 heartbeats, nothing. Then, emerging from behind the truck, Max limped toward her. Blood matted the fur on his shoulder, but his tail was up and in his mouth. "He's got the evidence bag!" Reynolds shouted. "Secure it!" Max delivered the torn bag to Sarah, his training perfect despite his injury. White powder spilled from the tear, and Reynolds' field test confirmed what Max had known all along. High-grade heroin, military-grade packaging. "Your dog's bleeding," Weber spat as officers cuffed him. "Might want to put him down, like Thompson's mutt in Savannah." Sarah felt cold fury rise in her chest, but Max pressed against her leg, steady, calming. She knelt beside him, examining the wound. "Just a graze, partner. You're going to be fine." The airfield was chaos now. FBI, DEA, and local police swarming the aircraft. Sarah caught fragments of radio chatter, more arrests at other airports, coordinated raids, a network unraveling. But her focus was on Max, on the trust in his amber eyes as she pressed a bandage to his shoulder. "Officer Collins." Reynolds approached, her face grim. "Weber's companion is talking. This goes higher than we thought, way higher. They'll try to bury it again." Sarah felt Max's solid presence beside her, heard his steady breathing. "Let them try. There will be pushback, political pressure. They might still take your badge. They can take whatever they want." Sarah scratched Max's good shoulder, felt his tail thump against her leg. "But they can't take this." "Who can they, boy?" Max's soft whine said everything. Sarah looked up at the chaos around them, the flashing lights, the scrambling agents, the empire of corruption crumbling because one problem dog refused to ignore what he knew was wrong. "Get him to the vet," Reynolds said softly. "We'll handle the rest." "And Collins?" She managed a rare smile. "Good dog." Sarah led Max toward the waiting K9 unit vehicle, his limp already improving. Above them, the Atlanta sky was starting to lighten. A new day was coming, and for the first time in months, both Sarah and Max would face it knowing they'd done exactly what they were trained to do, no matter the cost. Some said Max was too intense, too focused. Looking at the evidence being catalogued behind them, Sarah knew better. He was exactly what he needed to be, a partner who couldn't be bought, couldn't be scared, and would never ignore the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. 3 weeks after the airport raid, Sarah stood at attention in the Atlanta Police Department's main conference room, Max sitting perfectly at her side. His shoulder had healed cleanly, barely a scar visible beneath his fur. The same couldn't be said for Weber's operation. Like a house of cards in a storm, it had collapsed spectacularly, taking down 3 senators, 2 federal judges, and a network of corrupt officials across 5 states. "Officer Sarah Collins," Chief Richardson addressed the packed room. "Step forward with K9 Officer Max." As they moved to the podium, Sarah caught glimpses of familiar faces. Martinez beamed from the front row while Mike Chen gave her a subtle thumbs up. Reynolds stood at the back, her usual stern expression softened by what might have been pride. Even Lieutenant Davidson managed a grudging nod. "The integrity of law enforcement," the chief continued, "rests not just on following orders, but on knowing when to question them." When K9 Officer Max first alerted to those military flights, he was labeled unstable. His handler was pressured to ignore his warnings. Lesser officers might have yielded, lesser partners might have doubted. Sarah felt Max press against her leg, their silent signal of solidarity. She remembered those dark days of doubt when every instinct told her to back down, but Max had never wavered, never second-guessed what he knew was right. Instead, Richardson's voice carried across the hushed room. Officer Collins trusted her partner, Their investigation uncovered one of the largest drug trafficking operations in recent history, hidden behind a facade of military authority and political influence. Today, we recognize their extraordinary service with the department's highest honor, the Medal of Valor. As the chief pinned the medals, one to Sarah's uniform, one to Max's tactical vest, flashbulbs popped across the room. Sarah knew the story had captured national attention. "The problem dog who saved Atlanta," one headline had proclaimed. Another read, "K9 hero exposes military drug ring." But the reporters missed the real story. It wasn't about drugs or corruption or even heroism. It was about trust, the unshakable bond between handler and dog, stronger than fear, stronger than doubt, stronger than all the pressures to look the other way. "Officer Collins," the chief concluded, "would you like to say a few words?" Sarah stepped to the microphone, Max alert beside her. The room waited expectantly, but she found herself speaking directly to her partner. "They called you a problem dog," she said softly. "Too intense, too focused, too difficult to control. But they missed what really mattered. You weren't too anything. You were exactly what you needed to be, honest in a world of lies, steady in a storm of doubt, loyal when loyalty carried the highest price." Max's tail wagged once, his amber eyes fixed on her with absolute trust. "People ask me if I was afraid," Sarah continued, addressing the room now. "Afraid of losing my job, my reputation, maybe even my freedom. The truth is, I was only afraid of one thing, betraying the trust of a partner who had never betrayed mine." After the ceremony, Sarah and Max walked through the precinct's K9 training yard. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the familiar obstacles and training equipment. A new class of handlers worked with their dogs in the distance, their commands and praise carrying on the autumn breeze. "Officer Collins!" Sarah turned to see a young handler jogging toward them, her German shepherd puppy bouncing at her heels. "Is it true?" the rookie asked breathlessly. "Are you taking over the K9 training program?" "Starting next month." Sarah smiled as Max gently sniffed the excited puppy. "The department decided we might have something to teach about trust and instincts. They say Max was a problem dog," the rookie said, watching her puppy play bow to the larger Malinois. "That nobody wanted him." "No," Sarah corrected softly. "He was never the problem. The problem was a world that wanted blind obedience more than honest service. Max just refused to make that compromise." As if understanding, Max turned to her, his posture straight and proud. Sarah knelt beside him, running her hands through his fur, feeling the steady heartbeat that had never faltered, even in their darkest moments. "You know what I learned?" she told the rookie. "Sometimes the best partners aren't the ones who follow orders without question. Sometimes they're the ones who know that loyalty means pointing out when those orders are wrong." The young handler nodded slowly, looking at her own puppy with new understanding. Above them, a military transport rumbled across the Atlanta sky. Max watched it pass, but made no sound. He didn't need to anymore. That battle was won. Sarah scratched his favorite spot behind his ears, remembering the shelter workers' warnings, the doubts of her superiors, the pressure to ignore what Max was trying to tell them. All of it washed away by the simple, unshakable truth that had guided them from the start. Trust your partner. "Ready for a new chapter, boy?" she asked. Max's tail wagged once, decisive and clear. Whether training new teams or facing whatever challenges came next, they would face it as they had faced everything else, together, honest and unafraid. After all, the best partnerships aren't built on blind obedience or easy compromises. They're built on trust, forged in fire, and proven in moments when doing what's right matters more than doing what's easy. And sometimes, Sarah reflected as they walked back to their patrol car, the most valuable lesson comes from a dog that everyone else called a problem.